In this video, I'll be showing you part 2 on how to paint a yellow rose in oils. Hi, I'm Marion Dutton. Now, if you missed part 1, the underpainting, I will add a link to that video in the description box below. And again, I will remind you, if you want to paint along with me, you can grab a free reference photo, a free tracing and a free PDF material guide. And again, I'll add the links to that in the description box below underneath this video. And remember guys, YouTube algorithms does reward channels with high engagement, so do let me know in the comments box below if you are enjoying this type of content. And it will really help me come up with new ideas for content for this channel. So without further ado, let's jump on to add those colour layers to this gorgeous rose.
So I'm going into some cadmium orange. And I'm going to be working dry without any medium on the rose to begin with. I'm going to use this in our deeper areas, following the underpainting as our map. Really just cherry picking where I can see this darker colour.
The reference photo and the tracing and a PDF material list is available for this set painting, so you guys can paint along with me. All the links are in the description below.
Picking up a little bit of alizarin crimson now to really add some darker darks.
And I'm focusing on placing this darker colour right into the deep crevices of the rose.
We're going with our next darker colour, so we're going to go into some yellow ochre and a little bit of cadmium yellow. And into that I'm going to grey it slightly with a little purple.
And I'm applying this middle colour over everywhere except the highlights. As I'm applying the paint, I am careful to follow the direction that the petal is bending. And again, I'm using that underpainting as a map where I can see those middle values within that underpainting is where I'm applying this yellow tone. I'm also applying the paint on very, very thinly so that I'm still able to see everything underneath and I don't get lost. It is quite a complex subject and I don't want to be getting lost whilst I'm doing the painting.
So once I've established those mid-tones and dark tones, I'm going to go to my light tone.
And for that I'm going to use some transparent mixing white, some yellow ochre and some cadmium yellow light, and this will give us a lovely warm highlight or lighter tone. This colour is laid next to the other tone that we'd already placed down, but we are avoiding those super bright highlights where mostly white is going to be used.
For the bottom petals that are hanging, here I'm taking some purple with a little transparent mixing white and adding a little touch of that yellow to that mixture. These lower petals have got a little purple hue to them. Here I'm switching to the Dome Blender now and using a very gentle stroke. Sometimes I'm just lightly tapping and I'm merging the colours together. So we've just placed each of the colours on top of each other, and here I'm just using a very gentle stroke to blend these colours together before we start worrying about adding any highlights. And I'm very lightly using a mop to soften. Switching back now to some alizarin crimson, and add a very small amount of green to that, with it being the complement, just to darken. So we get a nice darker version of that crimson. So with this very dark mixture, I'm going to reinforce some of the darker areas right deep down into the petals of the rose. So now I want to mix a grey, and for that we're going to start with some yellow ochre, and we're going to add a little bit of purple or violet to that mixture. Of course, these are complement colours, so they will neutralise each other out and you'll create a lovely grey tone. Into that I'm going to add some titanium white and a little touch of black. I'm picking up a little mixing white into that as well, just so I can get a lighter tone. I'm looking for sort of a greyed down, it is slightly purplish, but a nice grey colour, so we can add some shadows. Using that reference photo as a guide, I'm going to start very lightly adding some shadow tones onto this rose. I'll apply that colour and then use the Dome Blender just to soften. Here I'm going back into some cadmium orange and I'm going to re-establish some of the orange tones. Again, use that reference photo as a guide. And once again, just lightly tapping those marks with the Dome Blender. We're going to begin to add some of our highlights now, not our final ones, and I'm adding some titanium white into that mixture. I'm using a nice flat brush with a chiseled edge, and that is important to get these petals. I wipe the brush and then reload and re-groom that brush to form that chiseled edge. I'm really just picking out the outer edges of those petals. Now I'm going into titanium white. I haven't cleaned the brush, so there is still a little bit of yellow on there, but mostly now it's white. I'm carefully going around the rose now, picking out the highlights, picking out the tips of the petals and any area that are really nice and bright. Finally into very thick titanium white as we apply those final highlights. Now turning my attention to the background, and I'm going into some ivory black, and I'm going to paint around the rose. I'm being nice and careful going around the rose. However, if you were worried, you could let your rose dry and do the background later. I've switched here to a smaller flat brush just so I can be really careful going around that outer edge. Once I've gone around the rose, I carefully brush this up into that undercolour that we did at the underpainting stages. The idea here is not to lose that underpainting, but to get sort of an abstract style background. So I'm brushing up and away from the rose. Here I'm using my finger to soften some of the edges into that undercolour. I would advise you wear gloves if you're doing this, or you could use a nice soft brush to get a similar effect. I want to create some dripping effects, so I'm going to add some medium to the black to really thin that paint down. And then I'm simply adding this paint on and just allowing some drips to form because I've added quite a bit of medium. I'm only doing this at the end. I'm not doing it inside of the flower or too near the flower with the black. I'm just doing it towards the end to try and create a little dripping effect. And once again, just use my finger to smudge a few of these marks in. Switching now to some lemon yellow, and we're going to just very lightly drag that over the top of the black, which is going to create a lovely green effect.
And to complement that green, I'm going to drag a few streaks of lovely cadmium red on there. If you have any drips on your leaves, you can simply wipe those off. And then I'm going to continue working on that background before moving on to do those leaves. To block in the leaves, we're using some sap green and a little touch of burnt sienna. And then I'm going to add some of the mixing white into that. Looking for a nice mid-tone green. Block all of the leaves in this colour. I'm applying the paint very, very thin so that later on we're able to add some of the thicker highlights on top. Going into the yellow that we made from earlier, and we're going to add some lighter tones to the stem. Using that same colour to pick out some highlights on the leaves. I'm using alizarin crimson and a little burnt sienna to create the little buds. And to pop some really bright highlights on the leaves, I'm using titanium white and some ultramarine blue for a really nice pale blue colour. And I'm using this colour to pick out the shape of the leaves. Finally, we're back into the very thick titanium white to pop on some bright highlights. I'm using this paint very, very thick. To finish off now, I'm back into the titanium white to put some really bright, very thick highlights on the rose to really finish this off. I'm switching now to the blue colour that we made earlier that we used on the leaves. That's titanium white and ultramarine blue. And we'll add some reflective highlights or shadow lights, if you like, over on these far back petals. And I drag a small amount of this blue colour right into the upper corner and the lower corner. I really do hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you are painting along with me, don't forget to share your version with me over on the MazArt Tribe on Facebook. And if you're not yet a member of the MazArt Tribe on Facebook, then do apply to join, and again I've put the links to that in the description box below. And again guys, I will remind you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and add your comments down below and let me know if this is the type of content you want to see on this channel. Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you again in the next video.